La Boiselle, July 1916. A British officer staggers through the smoke and chaos of a German strongpoint, his left hand shattered by enemy fire, fingers dangle uselessly from ruined flesh, blood soaks his uniform. According to legend, when field surgeons hesitate to amputate, he tears off the mangled fingers himself and throws them aside. Then, he returns to the fighting. This is Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Carton de Wiart. He has already lost his left eye to a bullet in Somaliland, been shot through the stomach and groin in South Africa, taken rounds to the ankle, hip, and ear across 3 different wars. He is 46 years old and has been wounded more times than most soldiers see combat. The Battle of the Somme, the bloodiest campaign in British military history, will test whether anything on earth can kill him. 16 years earlier, a young Belgian aristocrat enrolled at Balliol College, Oxford. He would never finish his degree. When the Second Boer War erupted in South Africa in 1899, the 19-year-old Adrian Carton de Wiart abandoned his studies and sailed for the Cape Colony. His father, a prominent Belgian lawyer who would later serve as Minister of Justice, had forbidden military service. So his son enlisted under a false name, claiming to be 25 years old. It was the first of many times he would walk toward danger when every reasonable path led away from it. Born in Brussels on May 5, 1880, Carton de Wiart came from Walloon aristocracy. His mother died when he was 6, leaving him to be raised by his father amid the refinements of Belgian high society. He was educated at the Oratory School in England before moving on to Oxford, where young men of his class prepared for careers in law, diplomacy, or finance. Carton de Wiart wanted none of it. Something in him craved a different kind of life entirely. South Africa would provide his first taste of what that life might be. Serving with the Imperial Light Horse, the young volunteer found himself in the brutal guerrilla war that followed the British defeat of conventional Boer forces. It was hard, dirty, fighting across the veldt, and it was here that the pattern of his existence first revealed itself. He was shot in the stomach. The wound should have killed him. It did not. He recovered and returned to the fighting. Then he was shot in the groin. Again, the kind of wound that ends careers and lives. Again, he survived. Again, he went back. By the time the war ended in 1902, Carton de Wiart had been wounded twice in ways that would have invalided most soldiers permanently. He had also discovered something about himself that would define the next 6 decades. He was not afraid of being killed. More than that, he seemed almost eager to test the proposition. He became a naturalized British citizen in 1907 and received a commission in the British Army. The following year, he married Countess Friederike Maria Caroline Henriette Rosa Sabina Franziska Fugger von Babenhausen, an Austrian noblewoman of ancient lineage. They would have 2 daughters together. For a time, it seemed possible that Carton de Wiart might settle into the peacetime routines of an Edwardian officer, but peace would not last. And neither would his patience for it. In 1914, as the great powers of Europe lurched toward catastrophe, Carton de Wiart was not on the Western Front. He was in British Somaliland, fighting a very different kind of war against the forces of Mohammed Abdullah Hassan, known to the British as the Mad Mullah. It was a colonial campaign of ambushes and punitive expeditions across harsh terrain, and it was here that Carton de Wiart would receive the wound that marked him forever. A bullet struck him in the face. It destroyed his left eye completely. He was also wounded in the ear during the same campaign. Most men would have accepted evacuation and a medical discharge. They would have returned to England, learned to live with their disfigurement, and counted themselves fortunate to be alive. Carton de Wiart had the ruined eye removed, acquired a black eye patch that would become his trademark, and returned to duty as soon as he was physically able. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Order for his actions in Somaliland. More importantly, at least to him, he was still in the fight. The eye patch gave him a distinctive, almost theatrical appearance. Tall and lean, with the bearing of a man who had faced death and found it unimpressive, he looked like something from an earlier century. a knight-errant who had wandered into the wrong era. His men would later describe him in exactly these terms, as if he belonged to the age of cavalry charges and single combat rather than machine guns and artillery. But it was precisely this quality that would make him so valuable in the industrial slaughter to come. By 1915, Carton de Wiart had transferred to the Western Front and taken command of the 8th Battalion Gloucestershire Regiment. The 8th Gloucesters were part of the 57th Brigade, 19th Division, a new army formation composed largely of volunteers who had answered Kitchener's call in the early months of the war. These were not professional soldiers, they were clerks and factory workers, farmers and shopkeepers, men who had never held a rifle before 1914. They needed leaders who could steady them under fire. They needed officers who would share their dangers rather than directing from safety. In Adrian Carton de Wiart, they found exactly such a man. The Western Front had been static for over a year when Carton de Wiart arrived. From the English Channel to the Swiss border, millions of men faced each other across a nightmare landscape of trenches, barbed wire, and shell craters. Neither side could break the deadlock. Every offensive produced mountains of dead and gains measured in yards. The generals searched desperately for a solution. The soldiers simply endured. Carton de Wiart was wounded twice more before the Somme offensive began. Shot in the ankle, shot in the hip. Each time he recovered. Each time he returned to his battalion. By the summer of 1916, he had been wounded at least 7 times across 3 different wars. He had lost an eye. He had survived shots to the stomach, groin, face, ear, ankle, and hip. Any one of these wounds might have ended his military career. Together, they should have killed him several times over. Instead, they had merely confirmed what his men already suspected. Their commanding officer was not like other men. He could not be broken. Perhaps he could not even be killed. The 8th Gloucesters were assigned to one of the most formidable sectors of the coming offensive. La Boiselle was a small village on the Albert-Bapaume road, sitting on a ridge that commanded the surrounding terrain. The Germans had spent nearly 2 years transforming it into a fortress. Concrete bunkers and reinforced blockhouses studded the ruins. Deep dugouts, some descending 30 or 40 feet beneath the surface, sheltered the defenders from even the heaviest bombardment. Machine gun positions had been sited with interlocking fields of fire, designed to sweep any attacking force with devastating crossfire. British planners knew La Boiselle would be a hard nut to crack. Engineers had spent months tunneling beneath the German lines, packing enormous chambers with explosives that would be detonated at the moment of attack. The largest of these mines at Loch Nagar contained over 25 tons of ammonal explosive. The blast would create a crater visible from space. But whether even this would be enough to break the German defenses remained to be seen. In the final days of June 1916, the greatest artillery bombardment in history began. For 7 days and nights, over 1.7 million shells rained down on the German positions. The sound could be heard across the English Channel. British commanders believed the bombardment would destroy the German trenches, cut the barbed wire, and kill or demoralize the defenders. When the infantry went over the top, they would advance across a moonscape devoid of resistance. Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Carton de Wiart, one-eyed, scarred, and eager for battle, prepared to lead his men into the fortress that awaited them. Everything in his life had led to this moment. The deaths he had escaped, the wounds he had survived, the wars he had sought out and mastered. The Battle of the Somme would test whether anything remained that could stop him. On the morning of July 1, 1916, 100,000 British soldiers prepared to attack along an 18-mile front. By nightfall, 57,000 of them would be casualties. It would be the bloodiest single day in the history of the British Army. The bombardment stopped at 7:28 on the morning of July 1, 1916. For 7 days, British guns had hurled over 1.7 million shells at the German lines. The noise had been constant, a rolling thunder that shook the earth and could be heard in London. Staff officers assured the infantry that nothing could survive such a barrage. The German trenches would be obliterated, the barbed wire would be cut, the defenders would be dead or broken. All the infantry had to do was walk across and occupy the ruins. 2 minutes after the bombardment lifted, the Lochnagar mine detonated beneath the German positions near La Boiselle. 25 tons of ammonal explosive vaporized the earth, hurling debris thousands of feet into the air and creating a crater nearly 300 feet wide and 70 feet deep. The shockwave could be felt miles away. A second mine at Boiselle erupted moments later. For an instant, it seemed the plan might work. Surely nothing could survive such destruction. But the shells had been spread too thin across 18 miles of front. Up to 30% of them were duds, manufactured too hastily in factories that could not keep pace with the war's appetite for ammunition. Shrapnel shells, designed to kill men in the open, were useless against deep dugouts. High explosive shells, which might have collapsed those dugouts, were in short supply. And the wire, that endless tangle of barbed steel that stretched across no man's land, had not been cut. In many places, it remained intact, funneling attacking troops into killing zones that German machine gunners had pre-registered months before. 30 feet beneath the ruined village of La Boiselle, German soldiers huddled in their dugouts as the earth shook above them. They had endured 7 days of hell. Many were deafened, dazed, half-mad with the constant concussion. But they were alive. Their machine guns were intact. Their ammunition was ready. And they had trained for this moment. When the bombardment stopped, German officers screamed at their men to move. The race to the parapet had begun. Whoever reached the firing positions first would dominate the killing ground of no man's land. The Germans had practiced this drill endlessly. They knew that the silence meant only one thing: the British infantry were coming. At 7:30, whistles blew along the British line. 100,000 men climbed out of their trenches and began walking toward the German positions. They moved slowly, weighed down by 60 pounds or more of equipment. Rifles, ammunition, grenades, entrenching tools, water bottles, rations, gas masks, and the 1,000 other items that commanders insisted each soldier carry. Some units had been ordered to advance at a steady pace, shoulder to shoulder, in neat lines. The assumption was that speed was unnecessary. The Germans were supposed to be dead. They were not dead. They were at their parapets, feeding belt after belt of ammunition into machine guns that had survived the bombardment untouched. As the British infantry crested the lip of no man's land, German gunners opened fire. The slaughter began instantly. Men fell in waves, cut down before they had advanced 10 yards. Machine gun bullets scythed through the packed ranks, killing and wounding dozens with each burst. Artillery shells, pre-registered on the British jumping-off trenches, began falling among the reserves waiting to advance. Officers went down first, their uniforms and equipment marking them as targets. NCOs followed. Within minutes, entire battalions had lost their command structure. Those who survived the first seconds dropped into shell craters, seeking cover in a landscape that offered almost none. The lucky ones found dead ground where the machine guns could not reach. The unlucky crawled toward wire that was supposed to be cut and found it intact, a steel labyrinth that trapped them under fire until they died. Some units simply ceased to exist as fighting formations within the first hour. At La Boiselle, the 2 massive mine craters had created temporary chaos in the German lines, but the defenders recovered quickly. Machine guns positioned on either side of the craters commanded the approaches. Infantry attempting to advance through the moonscape of churned earth and debris found themselves channeled into killing zones. The village itself, reduced to rubble but still defensible, became a fortress within a fortress. Every cellar, every pile of stones, every shell hole contained German soldiers with rifles and grenades. The 8th Battalion Gloucestershire Regiment was initially held in reserve. Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Carton de Wiart watched from the British lines as the assault unfolded. He could see the waves of infantry going forward, he could see them falling. He could hear the continuous rattle of German machine guns, a sound like tearing canvas, amplified to monstrous volume. He could see the wounded crawling back, the stretcher bearers struggling to keep up, the steady stream of casualties that would overwhelm the field hospitals by noon. The men of the 8th Gloucesters waited and watched. They knew their turn was coming. They could see what had happened to the battalions that had gone before them. They could do the arithmetic. And they knew that the German positions at La Boiselle, the positions they would be ordered to attack, had not fallen. The fortress still held. By noon, the scale of the disaster was becoming clear to commanders who had expected a walkover. Communications were chaos. Runners were killed before they could deliver messages. Telephone lines were cut by shell fire faster than signalers could repair them. Brigade and division headquarters received fragmented reports of success in some sectors, catastrophe in others, and silence from units that had simply ceased to exist. The fog of war had never been thicker. What could be established was grim. Along most of the 18-mile front, the attack had failed. Territorial gains were measured in hundreds of yards at best. Casualties were catastrophic. Battalions that had numbered 800 men at dawn were reporting strengths of 100 or fewer by afternoon. Some had been reduced to a handful of survivors led by corporals, every officer dead or wounded. La Boiselle remained in German hands. The mines had gouged enormous craters in the earth. The bombardment had flattened every structure above ground. But the defenders had emerged from their dugouts and repelled every assault. Machine guns continued to sweep the approaches. Artillery continued to hammer any British concentration. The village was a bleeding wound in the British line, a strong point that commanded the surrounding terrain and prevented any exploitation of gains made elsewhere. As the afternoon wore on, officers at Corps and Division headquarters confronted an agonizing decision. The attacks had failed. The casualties were staggering. But the battle was not over. Reserves remained. Fresh battalions could be committed. The question was whether to accept defeat on the first day or to continue throwing men at positions that had already consumed thousands. The generals chose to continue. La Boiselle must be taken. Its machine guns threatened any advance on either flank. Its observation posts could direct artillery onto British positions for miles around. Whatever the cost, the village had to fall. By nightfall, the first day of the Somme had become the bloodiest in British military history. 57,470 casualties. 19,240 dead. More British soldiers had fallen in a single day than in any battle before or since. The wire had not been cut. The dugouts had not been destroyed. The assumptions that underpinned the entire offensive had proven fatally wrong. And the battle was only beginning. On July 2nd, the 8th Battalion Gloucestershire Regiment received orders to assault the fortress that had already claimed thousands of lives. Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Carton de Wiart, one-eyed and scarred, prepared to lead his men into the killing ground of La Boiselle. He would not ask them to go anywhere. He would not go himself. He would lead from the front, as he always had. And he would discover whether even he could survive what waited in the ruins. On the morning of July 2nd, the 8th Gloucesters went over the top. Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Carton de Wiart did not wait in a command dugout while his men advanced. He did not observe from a safe distance through field glasses. He climbed the ladder, crossed the parapet, and walked into no man's land ahead of his battalion. It was how he had always led. It was the only way he knew. The ground before them was a moonscape. Shell craters overlapped in a churned wasteland of mud, debris, and the unburied dead from the previous day's attacks. The massive Lochnagar crater yawned to one side, its lips still smoking. Somewhere ahead, through the haze of cordite and dust, lay the ruins of La Boiselle. German machine gunners were waiting for them. The firing began almost immediately. Bullets cracked past, kicking up spurts of earth, finding flesh and bone. Men fell. The neat formations dissolved into clusters of soldiers seeking cover in craters, behind mounds of debris, in any fold of ground that offered protection. Officers shouted orders that were swallowed by the noise. NCOs grabbed men by their webbing and pushed them forward, and at the front of it all, Carton de Wiart kept moving. He was hit within the first hour. A bullet struck his ankle, the impact spinning him momentarily before he caught himself. He looked down at the wound, assessed it with the practiced eye of a man who had been shot many times before, and continued forward. The ankle would swell. It would hurt. It would not stop him. The assault pressed on through a landscape designed for killing. German defensive doctrine emphasized interlocking fields of fire, and La Boiselle had been fortified according to these principles with meticulous care. Machine gun nests covered each other. Mortars registered on likely avenues of approach dropped shells among advancing troops. Artillery, directed by observers who could see every movement across the open ground, crashed down with terrible accuracy. The British had firepower of their own, but using it required communication, and communication in this chaos was nearly impossible. Carton de Wiart found himself commanding not just his own battalion, but fragments of shattered units that had lost their officers in earlier attacks. Men from half a dozen regiments gravitated toward the one-eyed colonel who seemed oblivious to the fire raking the position. He organized them into scratch formations, identified objectives, and led them forward in rushes that gained ground yard by bloody yard. When units faltered, he appeared among them, rallying men who had every reason to believe they were about to die. The fighting reached the outskirts of the village. What had once been houses were now piles of rubble, each pile a potential strong point. German defenders had turned cellars into bunkers, connected fighting positions with trenches, and prepared fallback lines within the ruins themselves. Clearing La Boiselle would mean fighting through this labyrinth room by room, crater by crater, pile of stones by pile of stones. Close quarters combat erupted throughout the afternoon. Grenades flew in both directions. Rifles were fired at point-blank range. Men grappled with bayonets and entrenching tools in spaces too confined for any other weapon. German soldiers emerged from dugouts behind advancing British troops, turning every gain into a pocket surrounded by enemies. There was no clear front line. The battle was everywhere at once. Carton de Wiart moved constantly through this chaos. He seemed to bear a charmed life, passing through barrages that killed men on either side of him, standing exposed while bullets snapped past his head. A round grazed his skull, leaving a bloody furrow across his scalp. He wiped the blood from his one good eye and kept fighting. Another round struck his hip. He shifted his weight, adjusted his gait, and did not stop. His men watched him with something approaching awe. They had seen officers killed within seconds of going over the top. They had seen battalions decapitated, their entire command structure wiped out in the first minutes of an attack. Yet their colonel, already missing an eye, already carrying wounds from 3 different wars, moved through the fire as if it could not touch him. Some thought him mad. Others thought him blessed. All of them followed him. By the evening of July 2nd, elements of the 8th Gloucesters had penetrated into the ruins of La Boiselle, but the village had not fallen. German counterattacks pushed back gains. Positions changed hands multiple times. Exhausted men fought through the night, grabbing moments of sleep in shell craters when the firing slackened, always alert for the next assault from either direction. Carton de Wiart remained with his forward troops, refusing to withdraw to the relative safety of the support trenches. July 3rd brought more of the same. Dawn attacks. Counterattacks. The grinding, intimate violence of close quarters battle. Ammunition ran low. Reinforcements arrived piecemeal, feeding into the meat grinder as fast as they could be brought forward. The dead lay where they fell, there being no time to bury them and no safe way to retrieve them. The wounded crawled toward aid stations when they could, or died in shell holes when they could not. It was on this day that Carton de Wiart received the wound that would define his legend. During an assault on a German strongpoint, a burst of fire struck his left hand. The impact shattered bone and tore through flesh. When he looked down, he saw fingers hanging by threads of skin and tendon. The hand was destroyed beyond any hope of repair. A field surgeon examined the wound during a brief lull in the fighting. Amputation was clearly necessary, but the medical officer hesitated. Perhaps he was overwhelmed by the flood of casualties. Perhaps he wanted to evacuate the colonel to a proper hospital where the surgery could be performed under better conditions. Whatever the reason, he did not act quickly enough for Carton de Wiart. According to accounts that became legend, the colonel grew impatient with the delay. He looked at his ruined hand, at the fingers that would never function again, and made a decision. He tore off the dangling fingers himself and threw them aside. Then he returned to his battalion. Whether this story is precisely true or has been embellished in the retelling, it captures something essential about the man. He treated his own mutilation as an inconvenience rather than a catastrophe. He refused to leave his men for something as trivial as losing a hand. He had already lost an eye and had continued fighting. A hand was no different. There were still Germans in La Boiselle. There was still work to do. The fighting continued through July 3rd and into July 4th. Slowly, agonizingly, the British forces tightened their grip on the village. German defenders, cut off from reinforcement and running low on ammunition, fought on from isolated positions until they were killed or captured. The rubble piles that had sheltered them became their tombs. One by one, the strong points fell silent. By the end of July 4th, La Boiselle was in British hands. The village that had cost so many lives was finally taken. Carton de Wiart had been at the forefront of the fighting for 3 continuous days. He had been wounded in the head, the ankle, the hip, and had lost his left hand. He had rallied broken units, led assaults, and held positions under counterattack. Only when the objective was secured did he finally allow himself to be evacuated. The Victoria Cross citation, published in the London Gazette on September 9, 1916, described his actions with the understated precision of official military prose. It spoke of most conspicuous bravery, coolness, and determination during severe operations of a prolonged nature. It noted that he had personally rushed forward to rally troops, checked by a strong point. It credited his dauntless courage and inspiring example with carrying through a grueling task. It mentioned that after 3 days of continuous action, he was severely wounded in the arm. The citation captured the facts, but not the full reality. It could not convey what it meant to the men of the 8th Gloucesters to see their one-eyed, one-handed colonel still fighting when every sane calculation said he should be dead. It could not explain how his presence steadied men who had watched their comrades torn apart. It could not describe the particular quality of courage that allowed a man to treat his own destruction as merely incidental to the task at hand. Adrian Carton de Wiart had earned the highest British military decoration for valor. He had lost his left hand. He had been shot in the head, the ankle, and the hip within the span of 3 days. He had led men through one of the most brutal small unit actions of the entire Somme campaign. And he was not finished fighting. The Victoria Cross was presented to Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Carton de Wiart in recognition of his actions at La Boiselle. It was the highest honor the British Empire could bestow for valor in the face of the enemy. Men who received it were entitled to add VC after their names for the rest of their lives. They were saluted first by officers of any rank. They became part of a brotherhood that numbered only in the hundreds. Carton de Wiart reportedly treated the decoration with the same indifference he showed his wounds. He had done what needed to be done. The medal was incidental. What mattered was that La Boiselle had fallen and his men had taken it. The eye patch that covered his ruined left socket, the empty sleeve that hung where his left arm ended at the wrist, these were the real medals. The visible evidence of what he had given. The Victoria Cross was merely official confirmation of what everyone who had seen him already knew. The Battle of the Somme ground on for another 4.5 months after La Boiselle fell. From July 1st to November 18, 1916, British, French, and German forces bled each other white across a front that advanced, at its deepest point, barely 6 miles. The campaign that was supposed to break the deadlock became the deadlock's purest expression: attack and counterattack, bombardment and assault. Trenches taken and lost and taken again. The same ground fought over until it was indistinguishable from the surface of the moon. The statistics were almost incomprehensible. British casualties numbered approximately 420,000. French casualties reached 200,000. German losses were estimated between 465,000 and 600,000, though exact figures remained disputed. Over 1 million men were killed, wounded, or captured in a battle that gained almost nothing of strategic value. The Somme became a byword for the futility of industrial warfare, for the gap between the generals' plans and the soldiers' reality, for the sheer waste of human life on a scale previously unimaginable. Yet within this catastrophe, individual courage still mattered. At the small unit level, where men faced each other across shell craters and fought hand-to-hand in ruined villages, leadership could still turn battles. A commander who shared his men's dangers, who steadied them under fire, who refused to break when every rational calculation demanded retreat, such a man could hold positions that should have fallen and take objectives that should have been impregnable. Adrian Carton de Wiart was such a man. La Boiselle proved it. After recovering from his wounds, Carton de Wiart returned to the Western Front. The missing hand did not end his military career. He learned to function with one arm, to reload his pistol, to read maps, to do everything a commanding officer needed to do. He was wounded again before the war ended. He survived. He always survived. When the armistice came on November 11, 1918, Carton de Wiart had spent 4 years in the most destructive conflict in human history. He had been wounded repeatedly. He had lost an eye and a hand. He had seen horrors that would haunt other men for the rest of their lives. And he was not done fighting. In 1919, the British government sent him to Poland as head of the British military mission. The newly independent Polish state was fighting for its survival against Bolshevik Russia, and Carton de Wiart threw himself into the conflict with characteristic enthusiasm. He fought alongside Polish forces, advised their commanders, and was wounded once again. The Poles awarded him their highest military decoration, the Virtuti Militari. He remained in Poland for several years, watching the nation he had helped defend establish itself as a sovereign state. The interwar years passed. Carton de Wiart retired from active service, married, had children, settled into the life of a country gentleman. But when war came again in 1939, he answered the call. He was 59 years old, one-eyed, one-handed, and still eager for battle. The British government gave him command of forces in Norway during the ill-fated 1940 campaign. It was a disaster from the start. German air superiority made operations nearly impossible. British forces were evacuated after suffering significant losses, but Carton de Wiart had added another campaign to his record, another war to his collection. The following year brought the incident that would have killed any normal man several times over. Flying to take up a new command in Yugoslavia, his aircraft was shot down over the Mediterranean. The plane crashed into the sea. Carton de Wiart, 61 years old and missing an eye and a hand, survived the impact. He swam to shore and was captured by Italian forces. For over 2 years, he was held as a prisoner of war at Campo 12, a converted castle called Vincigliata near Florence. The Italians housed senior Allied officers there, and security was considered tight. The medieval walls seemed to preclude escape. But Adrian Carton de Wiart was not a man to accept captivity gracefully. At age 62, he escaped. He and several other officers dug a tunnel over a period of months, working in secret, disposing of the soil in ways that would not alert the guards. When the tunnel was complete, they crawled through it and emerged outside the walls. Carton de Wiart, one-eyed and one-handed, spent 8 days in the Italian mountains, evading search parties, living off the land, trying to reach Allied lines. He was eventually recaptured, but the attempt itself was remarkable. Most men half his age would not have tried. Most men with his disabilities could not have managed it. After Italy's surrender in 1943, Carton de Wiart was released. Rather than accepting retirement, he took on one more assignment. Winston Churchill sent him to China as his personal representative to Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek. The one-eyed, one-handed warrior who had fought in South Africa, Somaliland, France, Poland, Norway, and survived a plane crash and a prison escape, now found himself navigating the complex politics of wartime China. He served there until the war's end. The complete catalog of his wounds defied belief. Shot in the stomach during the Boer War, shot in the groin during the Boer War, shot in the face and lost his left eye in Somaliland, shot in the ear in Somaliland, shot in the ankle on the Western Front, shot in the hip on the Western Front, shot in the head at the Somme, shot in the leg at the Somme, lost his left hand at the Somme, wounded again in Poland, survived a plane crash into the Mediterranean. At least 11 significant wounds across 5 different conflicts spanning 40 years. Any single one of these might have ended another man's career. Together, they should have killed him many times over. They did not. In 1950, Carton de Wiart published his memoirs. He titled them Happy Odyssey, and the title was not ironic. He had wandered the battlefields of the world for half a century, and he had enjoyed it. The book's most famous line captured his philosophy with startling honesty. Frankly, he wrote, "I enjoyed the war." It was a statement that troubled readers then and troubles them still. How could any man enjoy the horror of the Somme? How could anyone who had witnessed such slaughter, who had lost an eye and a hand to its violence, describe the experience as enjoyable? The answer, perhaps, was that Adrian Carton de Wiart was not like other men. He had found his purpose in combat. He had discovered who he was meant to be on the battlefields of South Africa and Somaliland and France and Poland. War was not something he endured, it was something he embraced. What that says about courage, about human nature, about the strange corners of the soul where violence and meaning intersect, remains an open question. He never apologized for his feelings. He never recanted. He was what he was, and he made no pretense otherwise. Adrian Carton de Wiart died peacefully in County Cork, Ireland, on June 5, 1963. He was 83 years old. The man who had spent 6 decades trying to get himself killed in the most spectacular ways possible, finally ran out of wars. Death, which had pursued him across 3 continents and 5 conflicts, which had taken his eye and his hand and marked him with a dozen wounds, finally caught up with him in a quiet bedroom far from any battlefield. It was, perhaps, the only ending he would not have chosen for himself. He was an anachronism, a medieval knight born into the age of machine guns and artillery. Personal courage should have been irrelevant in industrial warfare, where death came from shells fired miles away and bullets sprayed by weapons that killed without discrimination. Yet at the small unit level, where men faced each other in the mud and rubble, one man's refusal to break could still turn a battle. Adrian Carton de Wiart proved that the old virtues still mattered, even in the new hell. Frankly, I enjoyed the war. The words hang in the air, uncomfortable and unresolved. What do we make of a man who found his truest self in humanity's darkest endeavors? He forces us to confront a truth we would rather avoid, that courage and bloodlust may be closer than we wish to believe. That some men are never more alive than when surrounded by death. La Boiselle, July 1916. One eye, one hand, still fighting. Adrian Carton de Wiart was exactly where he wanted to be.